One week after the sudden and brutal assassination of Charlie Kirk, the country was still trying to comprehend the weight of what had happened. His death. On September 10th, 2025, at just 31 years old, felt unreal to both his supporters and critics. What was supposed to be another stop on his speaking tour ended in violence that stunned the nation. While addressing an audience at Utah Valley University, a single gunshot rang out. In an instant, Kirk's life was gone. The shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson of Washington, Utah, was quickly arrested. Investigators later uncovered DNA evidence, online posts, and a handwritten note linking him to a carefully prepared plan. This was not an accident. It was deliberate, chilling, and devastating. Television anchors scrambled for words as the news broke. Headlines screamed the same message across every channel, and phone screen, Charlie Kirk assassinated. Analysts and commentators struggled to capture the scale of the moment. Former President Donald Trump, the first to publicly confirm Kirk's death, released an emotional statement, calling the act barbaric and warning against those who might celebrate such violence. Vice President J.D. Vance also spoke, describing the killing not just as an attack on a man, but as a dangerous strike at the very idea of free speech. Elon Musk, using his platform on X, condemned the breakdown of civility and said political debate must never again descend into bullets and bloodshed. Across the country, grief poured into public spaces. At Utah Valley University, where the assassination had occurred, students placed flowers, handwritten notes, and candles at the doors of the auditorium. A photograph of Kirk soon became surrounded by flickering lights. In Phoenix, Dallas, and Chicago, mourners gathered in church halls and city plazas. Some held candles, others carried American flags. Signs appeared with messages like "Justice for Charlie" and "End the Hate." The gatherings were quiet, heavy with sadness, but there was also an undercurrent of unity, a rare moment when people across divides paused to reflect. Official Washington moved quickly. Flags at government buildings dropped to half-staff. Leaders in both parties issued statements of condolence. The president spoke from the White House, acknowledging the tragedy as a grim reminder of how words can inflame and how violence can rip through the fragile fabric of democracy. Religious communities added their voices. Pastors and priests reminded their congregations that grief should not give way to vengeance, that faith calls for unity in times of loss. Meanwhile, Charlie Kirk's own family remained almost completely silent. His wife, Erica, posted nothing more than a verse from Scripture. His parents did not speak. His sister avoided the public altogether. That silence made people wonder. Everyone knew that when they finally broke it, their voices would define the funeral, and perhaps the way the nation remembered him. As the day of the funeral approached, it was clear this would not be an ordinary service. It had grown into something much larger, a farewell not only for a family, but for a movement, for a community, for thousands who saw Kirk as more than just a political activist. On the day itself, mourners filled the space to capacity. Outside, thousands more waited, some holding signs, some quietly praying. Inside, the service began with stillness. The casket, draped in the American flag, commanded attention at the front. Soft hymns played. There were no political chants, no signs of protest, only the heavy silence of grief. When the time came for family members to speak, Charlie's father was the first to approach the podium. For days, he had avoided the public eye. Now, with the entire room hushed, he spoke with a mixture of sorrow and steadiness. He began with memories of Charlie as a child in Arizona, curious, determined, often stubborn, but always driven by an inner conviction. He recalled family lessons about faith, responsibility, and service. These were not the words of a politician. They were the memories of a father, remembering his son. Then his voice shifted. He acknowledged the anger many in the audience felt. He admitted that the temptation to rage, to retaliate, was real. But he pleaded with mourners not to let fury define Charlie's memory. To do so, he said, would betray the principles his son carried with him every day. Instead, he urged people to honor his life by choosing unity, discipline, and perseverance. He spoke of resilience, of the determination Charlie showed even as a young boy, and of how that trait carried him through a turbulent public career. His plea was not for vengeance, but for continuation. He asked the audience to take what Charlie had stood for, faith, conviction, and courage, and carry it forward without bitterness. Toward the end of his remarks, his tone grew more intimate. He thanked Erica for her strength, acknowledged the grandchildren who would grow up without their father, and emphasized that the family would ensure his memory remained alive. And then came the moment that no one forgot. As he stepped away, he placed his hand gently on the flag-draped casket. The gesture lasted only a second, but the meaning was clear. It was the touch of a father, saying a final goodbye to his son. The image was captured and quickly shared across the world. The audience was silent, then responded with soft applause. No one doubted the power of his words, or the sincerity of his farewell. Then it was his sister's turn. For days, she had avoided the cameras, but now she approached the microphone with visible grief. Her voice cracked at first, but soon steadied as she shared her memories. She spoke of late-night talks, road trips, family arguments, and laughter. She described her brother as protective, sometimes stubborn, but always deeply loyal. These were stories of family life, of ordinary moments, that painted a picture of a man beyond the headlines. She reminded the audience that, despite the controversies surrounding him, Charlie was a brother who encouraged her, pushed her to be strong, and never let her give up on herself. These memories brought him back to life in the minds of those listening, not as a public figure, but as a brother, a son, a human being. Then, like her father, she widened her message. She admitted her brother had been polarizing, that he sparked fierce arguments, but she insisted his deeper qualities, generosity, conviction, loyalty, were what truly defined him. She urged people to carry those qualities into their own lives, not necessarily to imitate his exact path, but to live with the same determination in their own calling. Her tribute became more than remembrance. It became a challenge, a call to resilience. She declared that the family would not be broken by this loss, that they would continue the work of keeping his principles alive. Her message balanced vulnerability with strength, showing the world that grief had not defeated them. The impact was immediate. Clips of the father's words and the sister's tribute spread quickly online. Commentators across networks replayed the moment the father placed his hand on the casket. Headlines focused on the sister's plea for resilience. Even those who had been critics of Charlie Kirk paused to acknowledge the dignity of the family's response. Church leaders quoted the father's remarks in sermons. Community organizers repeated the sister's words about living with conviction. Within days, their tributes had become more than funeral speeches. They had become part of the national conversation about violence, legacy, and the need for resilience in divided times. By the time the service ended, the tone of the funeral was clear. It was not defined by celebrity faces in the crowd, or by the political figures who came to pay their respects. It was defined by the family's words, by the father's hand on the casket, by the sister's steady voice. Those were the images and sounds that lingered. When the final hymn faded and the casket was carried away, the goodbye was complete. There were no protests, no grandstanding, only solemnity and silence. Yet in that silence, the message of the family remained. A message of love stronger than anger, resilience stronger than despair, and conviction stronger than division. In the days that followed, the country continued to debate, to argue, to grieve. But through it all, the memory of that funeral lingered. The family had taken devastation and transformed it into something enduring. a farewell that was not just about loss, but about how to live on. And in that way, the final goodbye to Charlie Kirk became more than a funeral. It became a lesson in how love and unity can outlast even the deepest wounds.